Wow, we're back for another tutorial. Ain't that cool?
Okay.
Last time, we made our spawner. Good job. This time, let's start working on our game manager and managing how those spawners work, and also do some room transitions so that the player has some sense of progression. Here's an example of what we'll have at the end of the video. So to begin, let's immediately start on our game manager. In our scene, let's create a new empty object, and then create a new C# script called game manager. Attach it to your game manager object and open it up. So let's think of variables. There are three main ones. We'll have the current wave, the current amount of zombies spawned, and the maximum amount of zombies that can be spawned in the room. So let's create three public integers for this. Now that we've got those variables, let's go into our zombie spawner script, and I did a little rejig of the code off camera to make it a little cleaner. So if you need yours for OCD reasons to look the exact same as mine in its current state, it currently looks like this. Alright, to get this started, let's get a reference to our game manager. I'm going to make this private. Now as it's private, the reference won't get populated. So to do this, I'm going to do a game object find and then get component of the game manager. Now in our coroutine, we'll do an if statement saying that if the current zombie count is greater than or equal to the max zombie count, yield break, and that will end the logic. Then after we instantiate the zombie, we'll increment our current zombie count by 1 before beginning our reset. So with that logic in, I'm going to give it a test, and yep, you can see that our current zombie count is increasing with each spawn and stops spawning altogether when we reach 15. Cool, now I want to create some UI to display to the player once a wave is finished what doors that they have available to them to go through. I've made this arrow asset here, so what I'll do is I'll go into my UI canvas, I'll create 4 new images and size them appropriately. I've put them in the 4 directions around the player, then in my scene I'll also quickly make 4 empty game objects and place them at each of my door entrances, as we'll need this for the arrows to point towards. Now I'll create a new script called door arrow visualization and open that up. Inside we'll need a variable for our camera, an array for our arrows, and an array of transforms for our doors. We'll get the transform of our player and the radius we want the arrows to orbit around the player. In our update we'll create a new vector free called player screen position, and this will equal the main camera world to screen point based on our player's position. Now we'll do a for loop for the length of our door array, and if the number of the doors or arrows are null, we'll continue. Now we want to get the door's position relative to the camera again with a new vector 3, and then a new vector 2 called direction to calculate the direction from the player to the door in screen space. Now we'll want to place the arrow at a fixed radius from the player in that direction and rotate the arrow to point at the door. I've adjusted the sprite in the Quaternion Euler so it's looking forward correctly. Now set up your variables, give it a test, and you'll now see that we have the arrows pointing at the doors. Okay, cool. But we don't want that happening until the round is actually over. So we'll make our arrows a child of a parent game object called indicator arrows and set it to inactive. We'll head into our game manager script and we'll create 3 new variables being current zombies alive, a boolean for room complete, and a game object for the indicator arrows. Create a new update method, and inside we want if our current zombie count is greater than or equal to our max zombie count and the current zombies alive is equal to 0, we'll set the room complete boolean to true. Finally, if room complete is true, we'll set the indicator arrows to active. Now we'll go into our zombie spawner script and increment the current zombies alive integer. Then in our enemy script, we'll get a reference to the game manager, find it on start. Then in their die method, we'll decrement the current zombies alive integer, effectively keeping track of if they've cleared the room or not. So when we press play, you should see that the indicator arrows are gone, and when you've killed every single zombie, that will be when they turn on. Let's move on to beginning our room transitions. I'm going to start this by going into my UI canvas and creating a new panel. I'll set its alpha value to 0 and increase its size slightly to entirely cover the screen. I'll create a new animator controller, then an idle animation and a fade animation, where at 0 seconds it's invisible and at 1 second it's 100% visible. Inside the animator, I'll have the idle animation be the default. Inside of my animator controller, I'm going to rename the fade to fade out. Then I'm going to duplicate it and call this duplicated one fade in. I'll then click on the animation and set its speed to -1. This will make it go from a completely black screen to being able to see again. Remember to have 2 parameters for fade in, fade out, set up the transitions. I'm sure you can figure that out, you're a big boy. Now the final part of the setup is we need to add some box colliders to our doors. And we want to make them is trigger because we want to know when the player enters them. We'll create a new script called room transition and attach it to our boxes. Inside of our script, we'll have a private game manager and we'll do game object find just like we've been doing in the other scripts. Then we'll have an on trigger enter, and inside we'll do if other game object's name is player, then we'll call the reset zombie spawning script that we had earlier. Now we'll go back into our game manager script and we'll have a new array of game objects for our door boxes. Then we'll expand our if statement, and inside we'll do a for each loop of game objects in the door boxes array, and then for each of those we'll get the box collider and turn it to true. Inside of our reset spawning, we'll also do fade animation.setBall fade out to true so that will trigger the fade out. Make sure all of your box collider components are not enabled, since when all the zombies are killed, it will be enabled then. Make sure your variables are set up, press play, and you should have this effect when all the zombies are killed. Alright, that's what we're going to do today. Next time we're going to start increasing the amount of rooms in which we have and the player can be transitioned into, expanding our gameplay a lot more. So, see you then.